Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. We're going to be talking about Big District, Big Job, building brand unity on the web. We hope you're having a wonderful school marketing day thus far. Launching a new website for a large school district can seem like a very daunting task. So regardless of your size, aligning all your school sites with your district brand or even co-branding them takes a planned approach. We're going to focus on District 196's process that they took to leverage their website redesign to unify the schools and programs district-wide while building a consistent user-centric experience and ensuring accessibility for all. I'm Chelsea Jenke of CEL Marketing, PR, and Design, and I'm joined by Emily Buss of District 196.
Hi, everybody.
We're going to talk about where they're located in the United States. They're in Minnesota, which is part of the southern suburbs of Minneapolis and St. Paul, which is also known as the Twin Cities. District 196 is also known as Rosemont Apple Valley Eagan Public Schools and is the fourth largest school district in Minnesota. They serve approximately 30,000 students and have more than 150,000 total residents. The district spans 110 square miles, encompassing all or part of 9 cities and townships. They have 4,000 staff and 35 schools with a multitude of other buildings and programs. For Minnesota, they're quite a large district. But up until the start of this process, had very decentralized communication abilities between the district and the schools. As with any good process, we needed to set our goals. So Emily's going to talk to us about what those were.
Thanks, Chelsea. So the four main goals that we identified for our redesign was consolidation of school sites and navigation for a consistent user experience. As Chelsea had mentioned, we are a very decentralized school district with many of our schools on multiple platforms. We wanted to solidify our brand unity, provide accessibility, and have an ease of updating and sharing content across all of our platforms.
We wanted to get a lot of buy-in from our stakeholders, so we built a variety of groups and did surveying as well. So we had community buy-in, we built a leadership team, a champion group, surveyed our families, and looked at other focus groups as well. When we built our leadership team, it consisted of Emily, her director of communications, and her district webmaster, as well as ourselves. And we put together a champions team that consisted of voices across the district. Because they are such a large district, each of these schools or the individual sites or programs had their own webmaster in combination with other people that helped us facilitate the content and what was going out for communications across their school, as well as what was coming from the district that they also were needing to. And so we brought together, and sometimes the loudest voices in those particular people can create roadblocks for you. And so we wanted to make sure that we created a very balanced champions group that had the loud voices also with other voices across the district. And so we balanced the different levels to make sure every different high school, middle school, elementary programs had a voice in it. But we also balanced the dynamics of the group. And we had a lot of conversation around that. Emily, do you want to talk a little bit more about the balancing of that group and how it helped to identify those people?
Sure. So the way that we built our groups is we chose webmasters from every level of our school, so elementary, middle school, and high school. And as Chelsea said, we wanted to make sure that we had strong community and school buy-in. So we used those people that maybe were hesitant or maybe a little bit reluctant to change to make sure that they were on our team so that we could hear their aspect, but that we could also communicate with them and figure out how we can solve this problem together. And so part of this feedback in our journey of our champions group was to include them on these teams. And then we also brought them in on our RFP or request for proposal processes so that they could see the demonstrations of these various website platforms in play. We allowed them to have anonymous feedback so that they weren't judged, everybody's voices were heard, and that we allowed the data to drive our decision. And then we opened the discussions right away and figured out why we were hitting some roadblocks, why others liked other platforms over another, just to make sure that the dialogue was open and that everyone's voices felt heard. We also had some focus groups where we narrowed down our design needs. We looked at the data that how users were using our websites. We looked at how mobile users were using our website, different aspects of accessibility, and again, used that data to drive our decision.
One of the things that we highly recommend as you're creating these stakeholder groups is not to get stuck on the nitty gritty, but make sure that they know the goals and what they're helping to achieve so that you don't go down a path that you don't need to go down because decisions have already been made. So we really like to start it off with what our goal of the meetings were and what the goal of this group was so they can focus on it. And then we started to segment out those target audiences. Well, also remembering that you are not your target audience. So one of the kind of roadblocks that we kept hitting is that webmasters and individual voices were really saying that their families wanted something, but not having the fact to back that up. And so families were a very big target audience from a school communication standpoint. And we were hearing from them in our parent groups exactly what they were wanting and hearing a slightly different answer in some of our champion group meetings or our different focus group meetings across the district. And so we were really needing to back what we were saying and the direction we were taking with facts and how we needed to continually talk about the consistency of the layout, the consistency of the design and where families were finding things because the usage that we are teaching them, we don't want them to relearn that over and over as they go from an elementary school family to a middle school to a high school and beyond, and then loop back and start over again as a grandparent or a community member. We wanted to teach them once and have them learn everywhere where to go and what to do. Another major group that we use is we wanted our leaders to be heard. So we brought together every principal from every school, every director from each of the big programs and locations, as well as their webmaster into a big presentation group where we let those leaders be heard and held that showcase for all of them. We talked about design concepts. We wanted to hear their frustrations with where they're currently at and what they're really scared about moving forward into this change and make sure that they felt like they were a part of the process. And we picked it apart into different aspects of what we were talking about. So we stayed really focused in our conversations and made sure that our leadership team, which again consisted of Emily, the district webmaster, their director of communications, and myself, were all there to answer different questions, whether it was on technology, a design element, a usage element, or beyond. Emily, do you want to talk a little bit about why there were so many people and kind of your capture rate within the district?
Sure. So Rosemont Apple Valley Egan Public Schools is the fourth largest school district in Minnesota, and we are continually growing. Currently, we have an 87% capture rate among our residents. So 80% of residents that have students in our district attend our schools. So bigger doesn't necessarily always mean better. We have a two-person communications team. So there's myself and our director of communications for the entire district. So in order for us to keep pace with how our district was growing, but also the communication needs of our different schools, we needed a better tool to be able to achieve the efficiencies in our communication process. On this next slide, you will see that there are so many brands across District 196. A couple of years ago, on the left-hand side, you'll see our main district. That was our new rebrand as of a few years ago. But the rest of our schools, these are all their different logos. And for a lot of these, especially at our high school, these roots run deep. There are families who move to Rosemont because they want to be a Rosemont Irish. I mean, these are very involved school logos and school mascots, and we wanted to appreciate that and respect that culture at that school, at the same time bringing in brand unity and bringing everybody on the same page. So over the last few years, we have had a ton of different websites, layouts, platforms, styling, fonts, etc. And across the district, when we were first going through our audit process, we found that we had 6 different platforms being used without any collaboration or training. There were a couple of aspects that we had started to rein in on a few websites, but for the vast majority of this, there was no consistency across any of our platforms. So we knew that this was our opportunity to change. Co-branding was a major goal of ours. We spent quite a bit of time finding examples and ideas to work on co-branding. We wanted to allow the schools to have the autonomy to share their own brand, but we also needed to be cognizant and create consistency for our families. We heard loud and clear that feedback was something that our families needed and wanted. And so that's why this was the main focus of our rebranding, was to make sure that our audience was heard and that their needs were met.
And as I'm sure you've heard us mention numerous times, we wanted to back everything that we were doing with fact. And so that's where data comes in. We heard it from families, we heard it from stakeholders. We needed to make choices based on the data. So we really dug in and spent a lot of time on analytics. Luckily, Google Analytics have been running on a lot of the sites, but not all. And so we did have to make some choices based on that. We did user mapping. We looked at different experiences, and we looked at those user-centric pages and watched the different paths of the user, where they were going, times of year, what was helping to collate that data so that we can look at those top level navigation items and make choices in our design to help bring that to easier access for our users. Another big focus for us during this process was to clean up the absolute multitude of pages that were being used. It seems like anytime that a person had an additional thought, they made a new page for it. So we were finding that there were so many sites that were overrun with unused, out-of-date content, and you could barely find them. They also had a lot of search capability issues. And so that was something we really looked for, something we can continue to build on and make even better. Families and users were really confused in voicing this. And so we wanted to segment out those analytics and look at internal data versus external data. There was a lot of cross between what staff needed and what families needed. And our primary target audience for the school websites was going to be a family need. Secondary to that was getting staff to what they needed, but we really uncovered that we needed a better staff hub, staff portal. And so we segmented that out as its own website with its own experience that also had some career development as well as career recruitment opportunities. But now we weren't impacting the family experience on the main websites, especially for the schools and programs, where the district site was not only focused on current families, but it was also focused on prospective families that were starting and walking them through that journey and that experience. We filtered out those internal IPs. We looked at the top view pages. We also looked at the demographics and the types of devices that people were using in that content drill down. On average, the education industry sees about 70% of users using mobile devices. And we knew that some of our websites were not mobile responsive on the different school platforms, and that just wasn't where we needed to be. We needed to put things in the hands of our users where they needed them in the way that they needed it. As we did all of this, we continually questioned ourselves. What do we have to offer? What makes us unique? And how can I learn more about whatever I'm looking at or trying to get to? And there may always be more than one answer to that question, but look at your target audience and what they need, back it with the data and fact, and then continue to question yourself and question each other about what the best way is. Something that is on the same level of topic content, there's no reason to make new pages. When you're using a platform like Finalsite, you can use a really powerful tool like Post. You can use accordions, you can use tabs, you can use different elements to allow people to get the information that they need, but keeping it all in one central hub so they're not having to ping around the website to find things. Another big one of our goals was shared content. The district put out a ton of amazing content that the schools just weren't able to use, or it was getting slightly modified when the schools were going to use it. And so the district needed to be able to help the schools with their communication and be able to put that on their sites without them having to take an extra step. Another really valuable thing that I've always worked with schools on is card sorting exercise and working in your sitemap. There's something that truly happens when you take physical little pieces of paper that is therapeutic and helpful to help you get to an end result. And I have looked for endless software that helps in card sorting. but there's something about a group of champions sitting around a table and moving those pieces of paper and having conversations about why they're moving it in a certain direction as you are developing that top level sitemap of the why, of the what, of the how, and how that's going to help people to do. You really need to consolidate and condense that, and don't change to a specific page unless there's a specific purpose, or you're striving for an inbound marketing experience where you want someone to land on a page and the only reason they're coming there is because of that advertising component, that marketing component. But Finalsite has a lot of great tools that we can do that, where we can hide that page under and use it just for that marketing experience. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about navigation. So 196 chose to go with what's considered a mega navigation. This is because they are a very large school district, and we were making a very large change in the district. They were going from very traditional single line drop out to the side, kind of what I consider old school navigation on some of their sites across the schools, to something that was more on the mobile first atmosphere. But we understood and heard from our big stakeholders showcase that we were pushing them quite hard down the mobile first atmosphere, and they just weren't completely all ready for it. And so hearing that feedback, we took that into account and pulled them back a little bit to be more on the mega menu side, where we're still a little more down that mobile first design atmosphere. We're going to paneling instead of columns, but we are able to still get in everything that we need. And so we utilize those mega navs. We really also wanted to focus on not going more than 2 clicks into any location if you're coming from the district to a school that is changing the user experience to that specific. And so you get 2 clicks there. But we really wanted to stay true to that audience. And it's really easy to start using the main website, which is a very family focus for different users. Like we talked about staff. We don't want to create a link fest. I call it the linking circle of doom, where you click somewhere and you end up back where you started. That was something we wanted to stay far away from, and it happened on a lot of the sites. So this is where our hard work began. Another step in consistency is a focus on accessibility and how users are accessing that information. All the different ways our users are getting here, whether it's different device, through different searches. Some of those users may also be using assistive technology, and we wanted to create and allow people to utilize our sites and to have equity in those sites. Emily, do you want to talk a little bit about the background on accessibility?
Yeah, thanks. So as we were going through this design process, a lot of our websites that we were finding were inaccessible to even the basic user, but especially to those who are using assistive technology. A lot of our Google sites are inaccessible, especially those that are built on Cold Fusion or that are right on our server. Those ones were completely inaccessible to our users. And when there's an issue out there in terms of accessibility, people will let you know. And they will let you know that I can't access your website and there's important information that I need on here. And we have to make sure that that's available for them. So one of the steps that we started to take was we were moving away from PDFs on our website. So the very first process that we started in terms of getting rid of PDFs was in our policies section. So every single one of our policies, which was hundreds of them, were in PDF form. So if you were to go into it, I mean, there was a quick introduction to it, but then you would click on it, a PDF would open, and then you'd be able to read it. Well, if I'm using a screen reader, all I'm going to get if I'm tabbing through is a super extra long name .pdf. It's going to tell me nothing about the PDF. I will have no information about a certain policy. And a lot of our policies have to do with registering students for school or signing up for sports or their forms that they can't fill out. So these are inaccessible to our users. So step one was getting rid of the PDFs or moving as far away from them as we can. So policies was one of those. If you have a printable version or a PDF that you're using on your website, a good rule of thumb is to always have the written form or the content pulled out into either an accordion or another section of your website. So for what we did for our policy page is we copied and pasted, reformatted, cleaned up the policy, put it in a content box. but then put a download link to the right-hand side for anybody who wants to either download it or print it or look at it in a different way. But this way, if somebody's coming to our policies page using a screen reader or using a different form of accessible technology, they can access that page and know exactly what it is. All of our forms have become more accessible. Those are put on, those are be able to print off. And we are also moving away completely from forms either in PDF or on a different page and moving into a forms or our Qualtrics survey, which allows accessibility as well. And they're not responsive. So we want to make sure that when you're downloading them on a smaller computer, on your mobile phone, or on a different device, that you're able to access them. There also was an inconsistency of user maintenance and ownership. So across all of our different websites, somebody might be using a brand new PDF this year for enrolling your child, but another school might be using one from 2017. So there's inconsistent information and inconsistent PDFs across the board. So being able to put these all in a central place, pull them out of that PDF form and make them accessible is going to make all of our websites accessible to everybody.
Another form of accessibility that we worked on was writing alt text that was truly valuable and not just putting things like house or the name of the PDF in there, but truly working and starting to help in trainings. We hosted an all district wide training that was across 3 days and allowed people to learn about things like this. So we brought examples like the one on the screen to talk about good, bad, accessible, best, and what's just overkill to be able to use for alt text. We also have the really great capability, and we did turn it on, that if someone chooses not to put alt text on their imagery, that it suppresses it from the front of the website because we want to keep continuing to do that. It also allows us to monitor that. And so we can look and filter through that and try to help the schools continue to do better and better on an ongoing basis and audit. And remember, all that hard work, don't forget about your launch day. We talked about the launch day from the very start of the time when we were going through this process. And we had chose to do a staged launch. And so there are pros and cons to it. Like Emily had said, the district and schools were coming from a bunch of different, I think there was 6 or 7 total platforms that they were coming from. I mean, they had Google sites, which if you know anything about Google sites, they have their own URL. It's not a branded URL. And so we were going to have to migrate all of these together. We also had a lot of different users that were helping to build these sites since it was such a big school district. And so our leadership team really took the reins and ran the building and assistance with the website and the process. But then we turned it over and worked with the individual webmasters to fill out the content further that was not shared content throughout the district. And so we decided from the very beginning that a staged launch was not only possible for us, but it was also more practical. It was possible because we're not coming from one domain. District196.org was the main district domain, but all the schools had their own domains and we had just been forwarding subdirectory URLs. So it was district196.org slash WD was Woodland. We were forwarding those to the websites, but their actual URLs were not branded for them. And so we had the opportunity to do a staged launch because of that. If you are working with a URL that you are all consistently utilizing, there are some times when a staged launch is not a practical approach for you. And so you really want to think about what you can and can't do and make that decision right at the very beginning, because we don't want to get to the end and then try to figure it out. Emily, do you want to talk a little bit about how we chose to stage this launch?
Sure. So because we are such a large district and we did want to set up our users and families and everybody involved up for success, up for long-term success, we wanted to make sure that everybody had a strong foundation. And that began at the very beginning, which was their audit process, making sure that their websites were clean, moving content in a timely fashion, but also being able to work the new platform because there is a little bit of a learning curve. But this is such a user-friendly product that it was quick for them to catch on. So for this stage launch, in the very beginning, it was the district, our community ed, and 5 schools. That was kind of our pilot program. And then in December of 2019, we actually held the district-wide multi-day training session where we brought all of our webmasters in, gave everybody else access, and kind of used our Group 1 pilot program as kind of examples of how we should do this moving forward. So now that everybody has access in December, that's when we start kind of phasing out when schools want to go, but giving Group 3, Group 4, and Group 5 the opportunity to basically have the next year available to them to continue to work at their own pace, but also become more familiar with the platform and move things over as they're seeing other people launch. And so we chose times that were either specifically when students and families were kind of away from the website. So winter break, spring break, summer break, and then back to fall or back to our first year or our first month of school. And this gave families an opportunity to kind of step away and then come back to something that's brand new, something that they may have seen either on the district website or other school websites before, but then become familiar with the product and get all the information that they need to be successful for the year as well. And we did have a little bit of a few members of our school struggle in the very beginning with it because they went straight into the process instead of kind of starting at step, I almost want to say -1, which is to kind of look at what your current website is. How is it running? Where are things? How is it structured? It's really important to dissect what your current website is. And as Chelsea had mentioned earlier, maybe take some Post-its, put them on the wall, and rearrange your site mapping so that not only are you consolidating your information, but you're making it much clearer and easier for the user to use.
And change is hard for everyone, but we have spent all this time, all this hard work and energy. We need to celebrate, but don't let launch day be the best day of your website's life. It's amazing to see the transformation that comes, and 196 had a completely amazing transformation. The team really took the reins in helping the district come together to achieve infinite possibilities and really consolidate and make it more consistent. And no matter how big or small your district or your school is, the process is just as important as the end result. And your long-term success really depends on it.
So our key takeaway from this redesign was that the key to success is to start before you are ready. So as I had mentioned earlier, kind of start at level -1. Going into this process, we had very specific goals in mind that will not only enhance our user experience, but make our websites open and accessible to everyone who visits them. We relied on the expertise of our webmasters to help identify the challenges our users were facing. And then we came together as champions groups and as a leadership team to build creative solutions and that we incorporated into our design. Shifting away from our launch phase, it might feel easy to just move on and say this process is done and get the next project rolling. But it's really important that every user on your platform, whether it is a family coming for the first time, a student looking for some resources, your webmasters, any other users on the back end, that they feel supported once their website is live. In our district, we continue to work with our webmasters on their skill building. We use Zoom meetings and do some trainings via Zoom. There's a weekly email and tips that I share for tips and how-to guides on using our website, using our own screenshots. And then I'm available pretty much anytime to help with troubleshooting. I know it's a large district, but thankfully the questions are starting to get less and less as people become more comfortable with it. But you have to be willing to be able to reach out and connect with your users to make sure that they are successful as well. We spent the last year unveiling our new digital presence to our families, and with Final Site, we are now able to showcase the incredible things happening in District 196 in a more dynamic way. And most importantly, our redesign provides a consistent user experience regardless of which website you're coming from or which mobile device or laptop or computer that you're coming from. And it appreciates a mobile first generation and provides robust accessibility tools. And all of this process was possible because of the foundation that we built as a team and that we are working to continuously strengthen.
Thank you all for joining us, and we are always willing to answer questions if you have any, but We will see you soon. Bye.
Thanks, guys.